Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast platform. And if you really like what you hear, write a review. All right, so if you're a first-time listener, this is new to you. If you ain't a first-time listener, you basically know this monologue by now. But I am not a sex expert. But I love me some Dr. Ruth, though. But I am not Dr. Ruth. However, I have spent some time on this earth and I've experienced some things and I've witnessed some things. And because I am an excellent listener, I have heard some things. I'm a student of human behavior and I love to learn. And I love to research topics and present what I've learned, which is what I do on this podcast. And of course, I'm going to give my 2 cents about the matter, but I will also include what experts have to say as well. So, let's talk about sex. So last week's episode was on polyamory relationships. And out of the research I covered, all the relationships were short-term, nothing over 10 years. This made me wonder if it is possible to have a healthy, agreed-upon, non-monogamous relationship long-term. And when I say long-term, I'm talking grandma and grandpa who have been together for 50 years. Now, back in those days, open relationships and polyamory didn't exist. At least there weren't terms for it. Yeah, it really didn't exist. It was basically infidelity. Usually the man dipping out, having his little jollies on the side, creating secret love childs, and there being family secrets, people trying to take to their graves. Like, I know all this. I got cousins and aunts that popped up later on in life. Like, what? Grandpa was doing what? So yeah, that's how it was back in the day. But these days, people are so open about their sexuality, it's almost taboo to be in a classic monogamous relationship. But even those who are in monogamous relationships, typically nowadays there's some sort of twist to it, some explanation. We are monogamous, but we're not boyfriend and girlfriend, or we're married, but it's open. There is typically some sort of remix to the relationship title. And I know this because I played a remix relationship title game myself. But because of polyamory relationships in the episode that I did, I really have been wondering, do non-monogamous relationships really work? And like I said earlier, really work for me means 10 plus years. Really more, I'm talking like 20 plus years. Finding statistics on open marriages is really hard. In an article entitled Open Marriage Statistics on sexcoaching.com, it reads, however, there is not much scientific consensus around whether open marriage actually works. Multiple studies have shown an increase in marital happiness in open marriages. In one research piece by Burgum and Strand of 1,092 people who were in swinging open marriages showed 80 to 90% of the people were happier after they started to engage in the swinging lifestyle. Even 50% of those who reported were very happy before swinging felt themselves to be even happier after engaging in the lifestyle. Another study by Timothy Wolf showed 76% of the open marriages as having a better than average or outstanding marriage. Other studies show neutral results and no difference in marital satisfaction between monogamous and honestly non-monogamous relationships. Some open marriage statistics even show that couples eventually choose monogamy again. It's possible they abandoned open marriage after have gotten what they needed out of the arrangement, or they wanted to avoid sexually transmitted diseases. Couples in open marriages tend to feel jealousy more often than those who are in committed relationships. On the flip side, monogamous couples experience higher rates of sexual boredom in sexless marriage. Additionally, sometimes couples open up their relationship in order to stay in a loving but sexless marriage and still be able to fulfill their needs for a sex life. The biggest complaint about open marriage is centered on the fact that negotiating the rules can be quite time consuming. That I could imagine. Open marriage divorce statistics. There are very few qualified open marriage divorce statistics available. One study showed a very slight increase in divorce risk for couples engaging in extramarital sex, even if the extramarital sex was agreed upon. Another study showed no difference in divorce rates. Okay, so stat-wise, that wasn't very helpful. The concept is just too new to serve any long-term results. And census ain't taken or asking about open marriages and non-monogamous relationships. So it looks like we're going to have to base it off of the people who openly admit to being non-monogamous. The article stated that some open marriage statistics even show that couples eventually choose monogamy again. Well, that's the case with a woman on Mamma Mia in an article entitled, "He Had a Girlfriend Wherever He Was Working. What Life is Like When You Don't Marry for Love." So she writes, "My second marriage was an open one and we were swingers. My husband worked out of town often. He had the opportunity to be home for 1 week every 6 and often didn't take that opportunity." So every 6 weeks he was home for 1 week. And he didn't take the opportunity, damn. So y'all would go like 7 weeks without seeing each other. Okay. Instead, his company would fly me to wherever he was if we chose to do so, or he can use that ticket to fly somewhere else. There were times there in our marriage where we both had other significant others. Since he worked out of state more often than not, he would have a girlfriend wherever he was working. Some of them rolled over from one job to another, so he would fly to visit them when his 6-week vacation time would come about. 6 months or more would go by that I wouldn't see my husband. Damn. Not 6 weeks, but 6 months. Damn. I've had many people ask me why we were even married. I'll be honest here. It was mostly for financial reasons for my part and for access reasons on his. I was in a bad place when we met financially. He knew. I never hid it from him. I didn't have much debt, but I was about to lose the place I was renting because I couldn't afford to pay the rent any longer. On his end, the swinging lifestyle had appealed to him for some time, but single men aren't really welcome. There are too many of them trying to get in and not enough women. The women he dated weren't interested in going to swingers parties or participating in the lifestyle. Our relationship started out as friends with benefits with a bit of a sugar daddy thrown in. He agreed to pay my rent and I agreed to go to swingers parties with him. So she goes on to talk about how glorious her first swingers club encounter was in full explicit detail. You can read that yourself if you like. But in regards to the club, she said, "It's not something I want or need every weekend or even twice a year. It was honestly an experience I never knew I needed, but one I wouldn't trade for anything." Once we got married, we continued to be involved in the swinging lifestyle. We attended local house parties and went to the club a few times a year. We had been married about 2 years when he got the job working out of state, and our swinging all but stopped. That's when we opened up our marriage more and started seeing other people romantically separately. I don't regret our marriage, even though it began more of convenience than anything. I cared for him more than loved him, and if he's honest, I believe he felt the same way. One of the men I ended up in a relationship with is the reason I eventually left my husband. That relationship burned hot, quickly, and unfortunately burned out as well. I can't regret that either because it taught me that I am strong and capable of taking care of myself. I haven't been to the swingers club in over 5 years. My current husband and I are not in an open relationship, nor are we swingers. We have had a threesome with one woman and are searching for someone to do that with again. We've also had sex with another couple in our bed having sex as well, with the wives playing too. I believe that's as far as he's comfortable taking things. So like the survey suggested, most people end up going back to monogamy, and that is what this woman did. Not your traditional monogamous relationship, but a remix version of it. Let's go ahead and take a break.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
So welcome back to the GSMC Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown. Do non-monogamous relationships really work? Do they stand the test of time? Psychology Today wrote about a divorced woman in her 40s and explained, they said that a divorced woman in her 40s explained to me, this is the writer saying that, she explained to the writer that she maintains a satisfying relationship with a man who also has a lifelong supportive connection with the woman who is the mother of his 3 children. They find it works for them given their life circumstance. So it never mentioned, however, how long this couple has been together. But the article goes on to say the open marriage is now usually described as a consensually non-monogamous. So the acronym is CNM. There's an acronym for everything. CNM, consensually non-monogamous relationship. And some recent research finds that to 40% of men and up to 25% of women in a monogamous relationship said they would switch to a CNM if they lived in a world where everyone had open relationships. In fact, the research finds a continuum, along with some people are completely monogamous, others are completely non-monogamous, and many more are somewhat or somewhere in between. So the article suggests that if non-monogamy wasn't so taboo, more people would take part. As liberal as some of the people are who typically cover these topics, there is one New York Times writer who wrote about comedian and actress Monique and her husband Sidney Hicks in 2016 in regards to their open marriage. The writer asserted that open marriages never end up working long term, that the reasons are biological, and that open marriages establish all kinds of unworkable rules for what is and isn't allowed. There are people who want it all, to preserve their deep attachment to one partner and have romance with others. But what they don't tell you is that our brains don't do that very well. I mean, I ain't no biologist, but saying that it doesn't work for biological reasons seems somewhat legit to me, because I don't get it. I get jealous. And even if I agreed on an open relationship, I would be concerned that some aspects of that relationship are better than the one I have with my partner. And that would make me jealous. I'm not designed to share. My brain and my heart can't handle it. But then again, what do I know? In 2016, Monique did some press tours to set the record straight about her marriage. At that time, her and her husband had been married for nearly 10 years. There isn't anything on the interwebs that show that they are no longer married. So we can assume that this open marriage has lasted around 15 years by now. But reading an interview she did with Essence magazine, it's unclear as to if they are still sleeping with other people. So Monique says, a lot of people have asked, what does it mean? Initially, when I asked for it, it was because I wanted to continue to see the gentleman that I was seeing, and I felt comfortable telling my best friend, which is her husband. So when I sat down and said this is what I want initially, it was because I wanted to still have sex with who I was seeing and didn't want it to be where I was keeping anything from my best friend, her husband. That's how it initially started. And when I tell you the conversations that we've had, it has taken me to a different place where I'm not even thinking of another man sexually, but still open to it. So yeah, like I said, things are unclear as to if she is still sleeping with other men. Based off of that, it sounds like she only thinks of her man sexually and ain't trying to get none from nobody else. Now, they have indicated, and she also, like she said in that, like she was the one who initiated the open relationship. People assume that it was her husband because they look at her and her size and her weight and they think, oh, this dude's trying to get over on her. But she's like, nah, she initiated it. So yeah, they have indicated that things have changed since they initially came out in 2006 as being non-monogamous. She says, or they say, we're dealing with 11 years of being together, and there's the evolution of what an open marriage means. Because when you are a father and a mother of 3 children, there's not a whole lot of time to be doing a whole lot of slinging, said Monique. There's not a whole lot of menage a trois and all that. In fact, none, her husband added. But that's what people thought. They thought we were having these orgies, and I'm sorry, Daddy, she told her husband. This is how they define their open relationship now. So it's not just an open relationship from a sexual standpoint. It's an open relationship in terms of dialogue that you're having with your spouse, your mate, your sons, your daughters, your mothers, your father, because we always hear, be someone important or be yourself. But that's only when it's politically correct. When you've fallen into the boundaries of what people expect you to be as opposed to you being yourself when it is against the pre-verbal norm. But what we find is against the norm is really the norm. So they are in an open dialogue relationship. A dialogue relationship with their kids and parents, huh? Like I said, their relationship status is a bit vague for a couple that claims to have an open relationship and are open to talking about it and have this open dialogue. But I don't get what they're saying. That really made no sense to me. But it sounds like what we discussed in segment 1. Some people end up going back to monogamy. They were open in 2006 when all this came out. And now in this 2016 interview, she says things are different. So they were open, and now Monique only thinks of her husband sexually. And the only thing that seems to be open currently is their dialogue. So, yeah, maybe it sounds like they kind of went back to monogamy. But let's go ahead and take a break. We'll suss all this out later.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, welcome back to the GSMC Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown. We have been talking about non-monogamous relationships, but we have only discussed open marriages. And last week we talked polyamory. So now let's talk about friends who have sex and booty calls. Whatever, if you want to call it a booty call or friends with benefits, whatever it is. But how long can a friends with benefits relationship really last? How long does it really last? Love Pinky says, as fun as a perfect friends with benefits relationship could be to begin with, it does have a few bad sides to it. I'd like to tell you that you can avoid any dark corners, but at some point of time, the bubble always has to burst. And I say facts. Based off of experience, it never lasts forever. That fire usually dies, starts to burn out, or one person catches more feelings than the other person. And that is why I Love Pinky has 25 rules that friends with benefits should remember. We won't go through the whole list, but here's most of it. Number 1, don't fall in love. This is the biggest rule and the easiest one to remember. Don't fall in love. But then again, this is also the hardest one to follow. Like I was saying, one person might catch feelings, or they might both catch feelings, but one is stronger than the other. Like maybe one just really cares and likes the person, and the other one is starting to fall in love. It usually never stays even. Like y'all might be on the same page in the beginning. Yeah, we're just fucking. And then eventually 3-4 months later, shit changes. So number 2, have emotional maturity. Understand what kind of relationship you're getting into right from the start. There isn't supposed to be a happy ending. Be satisfied with a satisfying ending. Oh, okay. That's actually, it doesn't sound like hella romantic, but hey, there's some truth to that. Good suggestion. Be satisfied with a satisfying ending. So number 3, set ground rules. How often should both of you call each other, and how often should you meet? These rules aren't set in stone, but both of you must make a conscious effort to follow it. Don't get clingy for attention. Your friend with benefits isn't your lover. Don't constantly call them or try to make a conversation when you have nothing better to do. That's number 4. And that's where things start to get complicated, right? Because in the beginning, you're just hitting each other up because you just want some. But then if one person starts calling more, and then you guys make it like more of a habit to where you're having phone conversations, then yeah, now you're not just fucking, you're building an actual personal relationship. There's more intimacy there. So that's where, yeah, things start to cross the line. Number 7, don't be over enthusiastic. Yes, you get to have no strings relationship with someone. Yeah, good for you, but keep that libido and enthusiasm down, or you'll end up getting bored or scaring your screw buddy away. Number 8, don't go on a date. You may be intimate with each other, but that's no excuse to see each other in any place other than a bed. You'll ruin the relationship. And that's basically what they were saying before. Let's say the same with don't have phone conversations. Don't go on a date. When you're doing all that, you're building a more intimate relationship and connection with someone. So now you're not just fucking anymore. Number 9, distract yourself. Get interested in someone else as soon as you start having sex with your friend with benefits. I'll take that option of falling for them out it'll take their option of falling for them out as long as you are infatuated by someone else. So yeah, you got someone else on your mind, then you're not going to fall in love with your fuck buddy. Number 10, don't stay in touch too often. Don't try to find out about their personal life or have conversations about life and its problems. You're in to each other for sex, and you really should avoid involving anything else. Call for one reason and one reason alone: to have sex. I added that part. They didn't say that, but that's basically what they were saying. So yeah. So really, if you're so far, it just sounds like you need to be detached. If you're going to just be having sex with someone strictly, you have to be detached. And to be detached means you're not hanging out, you're not talking on the phone, you're not going on dates, you're not, after sex, boom, peace, deuces. You're not cuddling and chilling, watching Netflix or Hulu. It's no, we did it, bounce, deuces. Number 11, avoid sleeping with a good friend. As sexually attracted as you may be, avoid having sex with a good friend that's good looking. You will lose that friend, or both of you will hate each other within a few months. Yeah, there's some truth to that. Number 12, remember how it ends. Both of you will almost always stray apart or end up having an affair when one of you is in another relationship, and that can get really messy. Pick the first option. Don't be messy. I love that. Remember how it ends, and keep in mind that you will almost always stray apart. Very few booty calls turn into marriages, but I'm sure it does happen. I believe I've read somewhere that it happens. I don't know the stats, but most of the time, yeah, it ain't gonna happen. So yeah, number 12 is the most important one, at least in my eyes. You have to know it's going to end. Know that it's going to end. But it could be up to y'all on how it ends. Number 13, avoid anyone who's seeing someone else. Yeah, that makes it complicated. Because for multiple reasons, they could be seeing someone else and more into that person and just like having sex with you, which might be fine. But if you start to catch feelings, and you're going to get jealous of that other person, or they might start having sex with you and abandon that other person, and now that other person's feelings are hurt. Like, it's just messy. Number 14, mentally date someone else. Don't talk about your personal lives with each other, but convince yourself that the other person is actually dating someone else. It'll help avoid falling for each other. See, that's the thing about non-monogamy. It's a mindset. You have to shift your mind and be detached from your emotions. I've done it plenty of times back in the day, but it's emotionally exhausting in the long run. The sustainability of that mental mind shift is hard. At least for me it was. See, we got sirens in the background. They're like, yes, this is all hard. This is all complicated. Number 15, be honest. If you're falling in love with your friend with benefits or feel like things are slipping out of hand, you owe it to your friend to at least let them know the truth so both of you can decide the course of the relationship. This is where communication, this is me talking now, this is where communication comes into play, regardless of the type of relationship. In order for any relationship to have a chance at working, you have to communicate, even if you are just friends with benefits. See, nothing is just that simple. If you are engaging with another person, it's never that simple. It's never, oh, no strings attached. Oh, we're just fucking. In the beginning, yeah, you can get away with that for maybe a couple weeks, maybe even a couple months. But after that, it becomes complicated. Number 16, you can't fall in love. You lose the chance of falling in love with someone who may be perfect for you. You may take a while to realize it, but even if you think your sex friend is the most charming person in the whole world, you really can't do anything about it because it's too late to retrace your steps. So here they're saying two things. One, don't fall in love with your FWB. And two, your FWB is taking up space that would allow you to fall in love with someone else. So be cautious about that when you get into this. Number 20, romantic feelings will find a way. Romance always finds a way to crop up for one of you if the relationship lasts more than a few months. And trust me, both of you aren't going to like where that road goes. So yeah, friends with benefits, booty calls, they have a shelf life. Enjoy it for a couple of months because after that, things become complicated. And it sounds like open marriages and poly relationships have a shelf life as well, but maybe not as short as a FWB or booty call. I know someone who was in a poly relationship, and this is what he said. It was too much work. Nothing is worth it unless you have the right people. But if I found those people, I would try again. So, do non-monogamous relationships really work? At this point in time, we will never know. Maybe the stats will be here 20 years from now. But right now, it is just too early to tell. But there is one thing that a non-monogamous relationship is for sure. And that is complicated. I definitely appreciate your time. I thank you for listening to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Until next time, I'm Gaelika Brown.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.